Thank you, Sean. I'm going to now pass the microphone to Colin McDevitt, who has studied the experience of the Spaniards, and maybe he'll put a perspective, from an international perspective, on this whole issue. Colin McDevitt.
Thanks, Evan. Yeah, I grew up in Spain, and it was a great privilege to grow up there. Dirt poor, but lovely place to grow up. And one of the things, when you look at conflicts elsewhere, sometimes it's easier to look at an issue like this, not in our own context, but elsewhere, and then think about it in that context. In Spain in 1978, they agreed to forget. In fact, they codified it. They made a law that says, we will officially forget. We will draw a line in the sand. There will be a general amnesty, and from this day forward, things will be better. And they were, for 10 years. And then, it wasn't the first generation of survivors. It was the second generation of survivors who began to say, well, hold on a second. What about that big skeleton in the cupboard? What about that big unanswered in our family? What about that grandfather who's never been found and is still officially disappeared? And that festered for a further 10 years. And it blew up. And is the major fissure, the major division now in Spanish society, dealing with the past. We, I fear, some days, are sleepwalking ourselves into the same situation here. And to do that may give us a relief for the next 5 or 10 years, may make us feel as if we've had a new beginning. But it'll come back to haunt us. Because it always does. Because it did in Spain, and it did in South America. It always does. Now the other thing I think we need to understand is that the terms of the game have changed. Whatever truth and reconciliation process might have looked like in the early 90s in South Africa is totally different to what it would look like today in Europe. Because human rights law has changed. And the fact is, we can't do amnesties anymore. It would be illegal. It would be against the European Convention of Human Rights to formalise an amnesty into a truth process. So, I think, Colin, this is the question of the night. Do we have the courage to understand that reconciliation will require truth? And that truth will mean that we will have to think about how justice arises from that truth. That doesn't mean we lock people up. It doesn't mean we pursue people for crimes 40 years ago. But it does mean that we have to address the issue of justice, because we are obliged to now. The standards to which we live, to which we aspire, the standards on which we police this region today, require us to apply that to everyone. And that is, just let me briefly, that is the big conundrum we want to work our way through. I want to say something about victims, and it's an important thing when you're an SDLP representative. First of all, I don't believe that everyone was to blame for the Troubles. I don't believe that conflict was inevitable for everyone. It wasn't inevitable for John Hume and Seamus Mallon and the generation of people who held to a nationalist aspiration and ambition without allowing themselves to become involved in violence. And it wasn't to the majority of the victims of the IRA. Because they weren't British forces or REC officers or Protestants. They were Irish men and women. And yet their voice is largely ignored in this process. They are the forgotten victims of this process. And when I come to debates like this, I think it's very important to say that I am determined that their voice be heard and that their space be acknowledged.
Thank you very much indeed. Oh, yeah.
I just want to get back to the crux of the question, or part of the crux of the question, Colin, was regarding loyalist communities and how they view the HET. And it has the potential to destabilise a lot of loyalist communities, because it seems to be, and based on a presentation I was given to when the HET first was set up, I asked a specific question regarding the case procedure and the way things would be done, and I was given assurances about that. Assurances have proved to be totally false. The HET seemed to hop from year to year, case to case, seems to investigate loyalist cases almost to the exclusion of Republican cases, and have caused untold damage in our community at times. Now, I certainly want victims to receive justice and closure. I respect that, I really do. But I'm not sure the HET can ever deliver what victims, or what some victims, require. It's very, very important that we define what a victim is. I see myself as a victim. My wife was a former RUC officer who witnessed her colleague be blown up just outside a pub and was handed a bag in which to pick up pieces of him, including a piece of his ear. To this day, that has caused a post-traumatic stress disorder, and we still deal with the implications of that through therapy and through her constant nightmares over what happened. So, you know, many of us are victims in this, but we don't show it. But we have to define what a victim is, what a victim wants, and what a victim really needs. And I really don't feel the historical inquiries team can deliver that. And just one more thing, Eamon, because I haven't had a huge opportunity tonight. I'm not convinced that a historical inquiries team, no, I'm not convinced that justice, a Truth and Reconciliation Commission or inquiry can bring about what we want as well, because it has the potential to become a media circus, to be attended by the vainglorious and the deluded, to tell their story. And what is truth? Do we really feel that we will get to the truth? If we do, everyone has to come to the table with clean hands and composure and tell the truth. And I'm sorry, that's just not going to happen.
Thank you very much. I think that we're going to have another conference dedicated exclusively to the HET to judge by the attitudes. Anybody on the floor want to say anything with HET? Yes, sir. Very quickly, please, if you don't mind. Just speak up. I hope you'll...
Hello. Yeah, I would just like... my name's Peter Heathwood, by the way. I was shot in 1979, left in a wheelchair. My father died of a heart attack after witnessing me being shot. On the HET... like Jeffrey says, one size does not fit all, but I'd like to point out sort of a loophole for people like us who were injured. When I went to the HET to have my case open, they said to me, no, they couldn't do it because I didn't die. I was injured. I said to them, but my father died of a heart attack, and it says on his death certificate, emotional shock, and they still couldn't open that case because heart attacks weren't considered deaths in the Troubles. So, I mean, I would love to have the opportunity to test the HET to see how good or bad they were in my case, but we never got that. That may be one for politicians to take on board, that they could open up that situation. The other thing about injured people, and I'm talking about from both sides of the community, I'm here from the We Have Injured group tonight, and we have people in our group from all sides, blinded, amputees, double amputees, paraplegics, deaf, a lot of people with PSTD, serious emotional shock. And we often feel unrecognised, as even the advert that was on TV about 2012, our time, our place, we still felt left out. If we look back to the report of 1998, we Will Remember Them report said at prisoner releases that they would remember the injured. They haven't done that 14 years later. When Ames Bradley came out, for all its faults and all its faults, it never once mentioned injured people in it. So injured people feel unrecognised and forgotten, quite rightly so. And we would like to be recognised by the state. Now, let me make one last point to you. We also hear it put to us, oh, would you not draw a line under this? Forget about it and get on with the future. Well, I would just point out to you that people that can't walk, are blind, or have no legs, can't get up one morning and say, oh, life's wonderful all of a sudden, I think I'd forget about what happened to me. That is impossible to do. And I mean, it's important that that is said on behalf of injured people.
Peter, thank you for your very meaningful contribution. Is there anybody else down there? Yes, my lady, just in a moment, if you don't mind. This man's first, okay.
Jim Wilson.
Hello, Jim.
Early on in the year, we met with the Chief Constable in reference to the HET, and at that stage there was 85 inquiries. 81 of them were Loyalist, and 4 were Republican, and none of those 4 were mainstream Republican. Now, you talk about how we move things forward and where we're going to go. This is only one of the things that within the Loyalist community that's affecting them. You have inquiry after inquiry that seems to be pushed towards our community, whether it's a police involvement, engagement in collusion, or whether it's Loyalists. But the point that the point I want to get to, and I'm making the point to Jeffrey on Mike, is that at the end of the day, it needs strong leadership to move this country forward. And I know out there is hurt and pain within all of our communities. I'm a victim. I'm an ex-Loyalist internee, but I'm a victim. because at 19 years of age I engaged in a struggle against Republicans. And I believe anyone in this country who done those things are all part of what happened in this society. But we need a way forward, and the way forward must come from our politicians. And Jeffrey has said it's hard, but hard decisions have to be made, because we can't continue to keep going back and going back. It's like the Grand National in this country. Every time you think you're moving forward, you come to Beecher's Brook or another big hurdle. And sooner or later, one of these big hurdles will start to affect the fact that we have a government up there, and it might start destabilising us. And this country couldn't afford to go back through that.
Thank you, Jim. Malini, yes. Here,
Hello, this is Sherry McMichael. The one thing that always concerns me is about the hierarchy of victims. I mean, I have felt, and I think other people have said, that if you have a loved one who was killed during the Troubles and was a paramilitary, sometimes you're very much made to feel like a second-class citizen, especially among sort of the middle-class unionists, and it has to be said. When I first went into the Victims Forum, the Pilot Forum, there were some there who would have felt, what's she doing here, you know, paramilitary, don't want to know. That is always, and I think unionists do need to recognise that the loyalist community, ex-combatants and whatnot, who are doing great work sort of at community level, and I think we have progressed much further than our friends up at Stormont at some time. But it's that hierarchy of victims. I've sort of got past that now, but I didn't like being felt that because my husband's death was less, or wasn't as important as other people sort of within the community.
Thank you very much, Shirley. Thank you for your contribution, and thanks for your presence here this evening. Anybody else on the floor would like to make a quick contribution before moving on to Janet Douglas, who wants to put the last question this evening? Anyone on the panel wants to say anything? If you want to add something? Yes? Anyone there? Anyone else? Are we finished on that subject now? Yes, Sean, very quickly, please. Very quickly, because we're getting moving on in time.
I'm listening very carefully to what's coming from the Lawyers Committee, and I've heard this position been articulated before. But it's also important to point out that there's a major level of dissatisfaction coming from the Republican Committee as well. There was a very good report released recently by Dr. Patricia Lundy in terms of the differential approach taken by HET in relation to interviewing military witnesses. And it was well articulated at the time. And because of that, many families who have lost loved ones to the British Army no longer engage with HET. And it's important because that has major implications for Article 2 compliance when we're talking about effective, and fair and partial inquiries into the death of one's loved one. And it's important that loyalists understand that as well. The satisfaction doesn't only pertain to what's happening within the loyalist community. There's also major levels of dissatisfaction within the Republican community in relation to HET. And part of the problem is it just deals with specific cases. It doesn't deal with policy decisions taken by governments, which reinforced and I think compounded the conflict. And that's why I pointed out the need for a comprehensive truth recovery process where we look at all participants within the conflict, including policy decisions taken by governments and government participation in the conflict as a whole.
If I might
Quickly,
just come
Jeff,
back,
quickly.
very briefly on this. I hear what Sean is saying, but from my perspective, when I see Mark McGuinness going to the Savile inquiry and saying that he operates under a code of silence and can't tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth, when I hear Gerry Adams denying he was ever in the IRA, then I wonder if Republicans are up for coming forward and telling the truth about what happened as well. This is not just about governments doing it, state forces doing it, loyalists doing it. Republicans have to do it as well.
All right, Sean Murray, I think that merits a response to Jeffrey, because this is a panel we hear regularly. Just tell it.
Well, let's put it to the test, Jeffrey. I think that's the best way of finding it, because Republicans have been adamant that if a comprehensive truth process is established, they'll not be found wanting. And I hope that pertains to every protagonist in the struggle, including state and state force.